And hello again, boys and girls. Welcome back to the channel. So, as promised, I will do a review of this game, American Revolution. I've just banged through a campaign pretty much non-stop to try and win, which I've just about managed to do. I just got the victory screen a second ago, as you can see. I'll see if I can load it up. So we'll discuss really what I think is good about the game, what I think is bad about the game, and what really needs to improve as it stands. I think it's got some glimmers. I think really this is a prelude to the Napoleonic Wars sort of campaigns, if they do decide to make DLC. Or if they do decide to make it a separate new game. But there are some things about this game that can be very frustrating, and it does become a bit of a nose. It becomes a very tedious slog where you're doing nothing but repeating the same things over and over and over, and it can be really quite frustrating. But on the other hand, there are some good aspects, like this, like the things they have built off can be really quite interesting. So, for example, if we look at the previous game, which was the American Civil War, Ultimate General Civil War, all we really did was fight sort of battle after battle, and sort of complexity or the skill was really about the scenarios you were put in and trying to deal with those scenarios with your army being persistent through each battle. In this campaign, your persistence also goes on to the next level where you've got to think about things like subsistence and food. So the first parts of the campaign, or the first winter, is actually really quite difficult because you're trying to campaign north, but you have no provisions because your army is not big enough, and you haven't built enough of an economy to sort of manage the supply drain, and you do feel the first 2 years really pretty much starving, and it means that it can be very interesting how these other aspects of that they've added to this game does reflect on strategic decisions. Now I'm going a bit off kilter. So what is this game actually? So it's made by the same guys who made American Civil War. Instead of going for the old tactical battles, they've gone for battles and then increasing up to sort of almost a total war style campaign map where you have regions and provinces that you have to build up as the game progresses to enable you to field larger armies to deal with the encroaching British troops. You get the occasional tactical battle, but for the most part, you're just consistently sort of trying to advance, take provinces, and the main effort is trying to get victory from killing enemy soldiers, destroying enemy units, sinking ships, and capturing localities. In theory, you could potentially wage a guerrilla-style warfare where all you do is destroy enemy soldiers, but I don't think that's actually possible because of the nature of the economy. I feel like the game is attempting you to push you into this sort of guerrilla-style warfare as the Americans, but because you're so tethered to your nation's industry and economy to actually field better troops, that more often than not, you can't get that guerrilla style warfare. So how does the game open up on the campaign aspect? So you start around Boston, you secure Boston, and it opens up slowly towards the Quebec campaign, where you can take the objectives and these give you bonuses, and while you're taking them, you've got to worry about sort of British invasions and British reinforcements coming from the north. And then the game expands to the New York campaign, which is where you have to deal with 21,000 British troops. What I really found quite cheesy is that if you just get enough troops, if you do very well in the Canadian campaign, which is all about aggression, you take Boston as soon as you can and just push to take Quebec to cut off enemy reinforcements and stay as aggressive as possible as during the Quebec campaign, you can have enough time, enough breathing room to generate enough troops to deal with the 21,000 British troops in New York. Once you deal with them, mostly by cheese, you put like 11,000 troops here, they just sort of starve in Hempstead. You can focus on securing the rest of the sort of northern regions. So how the game's supposed to really work is you get these British naval invasions. They come in, they're supposed to break in, swarm around, knock you back, and then you're supposed to come back as the British start to spread out and start garrisoning to slowly wear them down and destroy them. This starts quite interestingly for the first 2 or 3 hours, but then it becomes very boring because you're doing this like this on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. And no matter how hard you build up that economy, no matter how hard you build up those troops, the map just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding all the way down here, and eventually you think, oh, I just can't be bothered anymore, and it just becomes very, very repetitive. So although you have this New York campaign, you have this new concept. Really, by the New York campaign, once you deliver those 21,000 troops, there's nothing new this game adds. You're just doing the same line battles, the same engagements over and over again, and the forts are more or less the same. If you have like 4,000 men, encircle the fort, attack from all sides, get a mass surrender, win the fort, and do that rinse and repeat on every single fort. At the same time, you can advance into Canada and do all this wonderful stuff, but again, why would you? In fact, initially my strategy was just to hold the initial choke points, because I don't need to take this territory over here. They do give you some victory points, but again, I don't need to take that territory. I can just plonk myself on these sort of forts around the mountains and reduce the cost it takes to constantly put up constant militia, which you will be doing constantly in the areas with low loyalty. So you can see here up north in Montreal, I've got low loyalty, so I need garrisons up there. And so it becomes a bit of an eye-rolling case of you need to garrison everything, but you don't have enough troops to garrison everything, so what's the point in garrisoning everything when I can just have a nice little concentrated economy? My logic in the end was just that because a lot of the time your troops fall back to the next position, if I just have a couple of forts here, if the British do send more reinforcements, it buys me time and it slowly snowballs to a larger defensive system. Of course, once you finish the New York campaign, you then move down into the Savannah campaign, and after the Savannah campaign, you get all the way down to Georgetown. Now, each campaign has its own sort of special issues. So the Pennsylvania campaign is a pretty standard campaign, but down south you don't have to worry so much about provisions or winter, but you do have to worry about loyalty. And so early on, unless you can secure everything, what generally happens is you slowly have to start regarrisoning, and it takes a greater economic problem, while you're also dealing with invasions from Canada, while you're also potentially dealing with invasions from the west, where you're also worrying about naval invasions. So in the end, it just becomes too much to deal with. In my case, I advanced extremely well early on with some French troops and some Spanish troops, took Georgetown, took Savannah, and then set up a defensive fort. But then the British sent a massive naval invasion, and the French invaded from Quebec, because if you take Quebec, what happens is you get a decision or an event that you can't refuse, and you go to war with the French over Quebec, and it screws you up massively. So I had to send troops back up north to take Quebec, to then go back down south to try and secure the south, but because now I'd been away for so long, there wasn't enough loyalty in the south. So what I had to do now is slowly start to advance, and then of course I got pushed back because of winter. And you do feel like there's a sort of a case of whack-a-mole, coupled with this constant case of whack-a-mole and the sort of uninterestingness of the fights towards the end. It just becomes a case of auto-resolve. I mean, there was a few attempts, there's a few times, some glimpses, like early on, what I really liked was the attack for Boston, where it was 6,000 men versus 6,000 men. It was a great battle. Or the rush up to Quebec with your wagon to try and secure it before next year or enemy reinforcements come, which I found really good. This could have been a set piece part, but I was fed up of having constantly lose territory and retake it, so I couldn't be bothered with the invasion of New York. And another interesting part was because of the supply, marching my tiny army of 2,100, supposed to be about 4,000 men, out of Bern because of lack of supply through enemy territory back to friendly supply. I mean, there are elements of storytelling or narrative sort of storytelling which can be really fun, but unfortunately it's marred between hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of attack 600 men, take a position, hold it. If it's got low loyalty, send in a militia, move on to the next province, and rinse and repeat. Tactical battle after tactical battle after tactical battle. That's what makes the game somewhat repetitive, is that nothing new comes in. Really, after the New York campaign, you've pretty much seen everything this game has to offer. You could stop at a New York campaign. At the same time, this constant pushing towards having to put on more garrisons or more troops or more supply, you just end and having to worry about naval invasions, and also having to worry about Quebec. It means that the map becomes too large and the game becomes less fun. There's too much of a focus upon management now, and too much of a focus on whack-a-moling or going, okay, you just end up like feeling like you're spinning plates. It doesn't feel like a narrative journey. And I can understand what they tried to do. They tried to do total war in the American Revolutionary period, but that's an awful idea. I mean, what if you ask any total war person, what would you do to make the game better? I reckon a significant portion would be like, let's cut out the civ building, because I'm quite a big Total War fan myself. And why did you build an economy? Well, you built an economy so you could have a large army. Why did you want a large army? Because so you could have bigger battles. The actual building of an economy just felt like nothing, and it's just rather boring in Total War. It's something you had to do, and now what they've done is introduce this as well as naval invasions, which becomes a bit of a nightmare. Don't get me wrong, there are some things I do like about the game. Like, for example, I do love the production management. So you start off with no production, but in the end, you can start seeing your economy grow and your nation become stronger. But the problem is it never feels like you become more powerful than Britain or an even match, because you're spread out too thin. So even having a large economy means really nothing for you. The economy I ended up cheesing, so I ended up mass producing ammunition. The reason I started mass producing ammunition was because it made most profit, and so I'd spend a lot of time off that, and selling whatever I could afford. And what I basically did for my economy was go, all right, I need production, give that, or let the AI manage it. And because I could not be bothered, imagine having to do this repeatedly, build a trade depot, build a supply house for like 500 provinces. You'd go mad. You would literally go mad. I think you'd probably rage quit. It's just been a mind-numbing experience. So I do like the economy. I do like how your nation gets bigger and larger. I do like how the AI can actually build your economy for you. There are some things I'm not happy with, like they don't really bother to build infrastructure, and I don't really build supply, but it was enough that I never had to really worry about building my own economy. Once in a while I'd have to build up a few recruiting houses, but it just became a bit of a nuisance. It did the job. It did the job. Now, I think they bit off far too much than they could chew. What they did is they did really successful in American Civil War. They had a good mechanics there, and they thought, you know what, let's go bigger. And of course they did, and they went bigger. But the problem they have is that the type of warfare is very repetitive. So if we talk about Total War, Napoleonic warfare, it's line up in a line and fire at each other with cannons and cavalry. Well, you start with militia, so your troops crap. Then you eventually get fusiliers, which are infantry, and then eventually you can afford some cannon. But for the most part, it's just going to be lining troops up, firing at each other, and seeing which side wins. But Total War has got the benefit of having better graphics, whereas this game has worse graphics. So it's got worse graphics, worse gameplay in terms of the tactical battles. I mean, the AI is significantly better than I would say Total War AI, but it's always on the offensive. It will just attack your lines, and you can just form one extended line. So what I was starting to do was build one big extended line, fire on them, they'd break, I would charge, and they'd surrender. And I'd just do that every single battle, and it became very, very boring. Because by the nature of the gameplay, your troops are even or your troops are worse, and it's just either who's got more numbers at that stage. And it just became really, really frustrating for me, because I was just playing through to the end so I could turn around and do a review. Basically, I would have quit if a casual player probably around here and be like, "There's no point playing anymore." But just to do a YouTube video to say I've done it and I've won the game, I had to persevere. Yeah, they bit of more like to do, and by putting so much of this crap on you, it's awful. Yeah, and that's the thing. So how did the developers get around it with American Civil War? Well, with the American Civil War, they reduced down the scope, and that game was lovely. I loved that game, but they allowed you more personality with your armies. So you could build your armies by hand. Instead, with my armies, it's a case of, all right, this is militia number 150. It's died. Time to pull out Fusilier number 55 to send that in. It effectively became just a numbers game. You didn't really feel personally attached to your troops. You never really felt personally trapped with the army of George Washington. It was just a case of charge more men, so on and so forth. And it became a bit of a churn. At the same time, the way the game was balanced was that you would effectively be either artificially limited by only bringing a certain amount of troops to a battle in American Civil War, or the game would historically start to limit how many reinforcements and supplies you got depending which side you were on. This meant you really felt a narrative experience of being a confederacy and slowly running out of troops but being the survivor out of tactical genius. Or the or playing as a union where you were just having to do these, you'd have all the supply, but because you were so limited and because of the nature of the battles, like Cold Harbor, you did have to do these mass frontal assaults, and this meant that the game really was a test of your tactical skill, and you'd go back to try and improve the experience over and over and over again. By removing these tactical battles, by making this game more Total War-like, they have removed that sense of skill. They have basically taken away any of that sort of artificial difficulty or these artificial scenarios that would challenge you, because all you had in Miracles of War was line infantry firing at line infantry, cannons and cav, pretty much like this, but the difference is it was the scenarios they put you in, like Fredericksburg, where you had to do a frontal charge against in place positions and you had to do it within a certain time frame. Yes, the game was just line infantry over and over and over again, but because of the scenario they put you in, you had to think differently, you'd have to behave differently, you had to set up tactically, you had to think about my armies. Whereas here, because the battles are now dynamic, you don't feel any of that. There is no sort of tactical. I mean, there was a few battles over here like Concord and maybe Lexington where you do have these historical battles that you do have to think about, but they're pretty much few and far between. And that's what makes the game very, very disappointing, in that they've taken away any sort of interest in the combat and added all this management stuff on top of it, taking away that personal feeling within your armies, or that ability, that replayability of skill. Another thing these guys have done has really, they've flipped the game on the head. Normally a game's supposed to be very easy at the start and then gets difficult. In this game, it starts very, very hard and gets easy. You could lose the game in the first year if you're not paying attention. Your troops are worse than the British, and so you've just got to really get lucky or to do a bit of cheese to take Boston. And once you do take Boston and push up to Quebec, and you do it in good time, you've got enough time to build up enough of an army to deal with New York. And once you deal with New York, the game gets so much easier. You just sit around doing nothing for the most part. And by the time you get to the end game, you've already got enough victory points that you can afford to not really worry about the collapse of the South. So what I feel like the developers should really be doing is instead cut it down to theatres. Like they've got the good mechanics there, but they need a more linear narrative. They can still have dynamic battles and so on and so forth, but they need to make it more linear. So what I would have done as a quality of life improvement is I would have done the first campaign, which is the 1775 campaign, which is over Boston and Quebec. And what you'd have is you'd still have this dynamic battles, but occasionally you'd have to move your armies into a big battle, like you'd have to, like a proper battle, like Battle of Concord, Battle of Lexington, Battle of Bunker Hill, all that wonderful stuff. And then and with those big battles, you could bring in whatever armies you want. So if you had Fusiliers over here, you could bring the Fusiliers in. Which, of course, is ahistorical, but then would allow you to play these more tactical battles where you had to think about what you needed to do, and made the game more challenging, more interesting, because you'd actually have to fight a scenario-based battle with certain physical preconditions or troop limitations or tactical objectives you had to achieve in order to win. And of course, if you win these battles, you get bonuses, and if you lose the battles, you get minuses. And of course, you have your big three main objectives, so Boston, Fort Ticonderoga, and Quebec, and that would be your first campaign. So you'd take Boston, you'd fight a couple of battles, take Boston, fight another set battle at Ticonderoga, and then fight another set battle at Quebec. And then that way, if you won the campaign, if you took those objectives, you win the campaign, you would then move on to the next campaign, which would be the New York campaign. And if you achieve those objectives within the time frame given to you, then what would happen is you would get bonuses, you could bring troops over, and then you have. But of course, by making a second campaign, this map would disappear in the north, and you just have this map here of New York and all this sort of territory. And if you wanted to have the supplies and that still keep coming down, you could just have it blacked out and just basically not have naval invasions up there. And at this stage, you'd be able to select a couple of generals, select a couple of troops, like maybe 2 generals and 4,000 men each, and bring them down for the New York campaign. And again, you'd have set objective, set pitched battles, and you'd only have to worry about a theatre. And that would be 1776. And then 1777, you might be able to have, I don't know, a Western campaign or a Frontiers campaign with objectives and tactical battles, which again compartmentalizes the game and compartmentalizes the theatres to stop this overwhelming amount of busy work the player has to do. At the same time, it allows you to add more of an artificial difficulty or add more balance to the game. So instead of being able to send down 20,000 troops to deal with the British here, you could only send 8,000 troops down, and then of course you would have to deal with the British taking territory and pushing them out and achieving certain objectives within certain dates and times. And this would allow the player to actually get more invested in the campaign, get more invested in their armies because they'd pick what Fusiliers to bring and not have to worry so much about the busy work in the north and the south and so on and so forth. So I would have first compartmentalized the game so you'd have different levels that allow you to bring troops over or bring supplies over, whatever, depending on how well you did, a bit like American Civil War, to each theatre as the years progress. And then, of course, if there was a battle up north during that, like, I don't know, 1776, then you could fight a tactical battle up here. Like, you could teleport an army up there to fight a tactical battle. And depending on how you did, you would then get bonuses or maybe get a reduction in recruits because they're all being sent up north, or get a reduction in provisions because they're being sent up north. And it wouldn't be difficult. I mean, you've got literally the colonies management system here. So all you need to do is black out the north when you're doing a New York campaign, and you can still allow these buildings to build and keep going. You just have to disable rebellions and things and so on and so forth. And so it wouldn't feel like you were wasted any time building up your economies in the north, because you would still get the bonuses in the north without the hassle of having to deal with it. And this would allow for a much more enjoyable experience. So if I was to break it up, I would do. Oh, the game's really laggy when I do this. I'd break up the Quebec campaign as the first campaign for the first year. Then I would have the New York campaign as its own theatre for the second year, which again would all be blacked out, and you'd have to deal with certain objectives in New York and with tactical battles and like scenario battles that would make the game more interesting. Then you could have a Western Front campaign or campaign for the interior objectives. Again, win condition, a draw condition, and a defeat condition depending on what objectives you achieved at what time. Then of course you'd have the Pennsylvania campaign, and then you could have the Southern campaign, and you could have more of that interior campaign. You just basically split it up. So that's another campaign, this is another campaign, this is the final campaign. And if you really want, as a last hurrah, 1779, 1780, you can have the whole map, and it becomes a case of like Attila, like survive for X amount of months or X amount of years. Survive for X amount of months, or hold this position for X amount of months, and that will be your victory condition. Like, I feel like the game has got a good baseline to be something very good, but by making it more sandboxy and less articulated, what they've done is they've effectively made it boring. The game has now become boring to play, because all you're doing is repeating the same tactical battles against the same AI on the same maps without any difference, without any nuance. It's the same thing over and over and over again for 5 to 6 hours. And without those sort of scenarios, without that sort of without that curated storytelling, all you end up with is rinse and repeat and boredom. You end up with boredom. Like, why would I play this when I can play Napoleon Total War? Or I can play Empire Total War. I can just play Empire Total War with this without the hassle of never-ending naval invasions, and play as the Americans and focus on the interior in America and with better graphics. I get it. They've gone big, they've gone bold, but it needs to be brought back. It needs to be curbed back into something a bit more curated. And I think if they are going for the Napoleonic Total War, it would work better, because you'd have like the Marengo, you'd have the Italian campaign. It would just be the region of Italy, and with your army, and then you'd have the Egyptian campaign, and then you'll just be the Egyptian campaign. You don't need the entire world map to play it, and that's what I think. I think that's what they're trying to go for. They're trying to go for these larger campaigns, this larger scale for like Europe. It's like, no, don't do that. You're going to have a real bad problem, and the problem is boredom. Problem is repetition. The problem is you work so hard, and then 21,000 or 10,000 troops, American troops, come and just destroy all your hard work. So at one stage, I had the entirety of the south, and then I had to go up north to deal with the French. And then what happened is the British just came and destroyed everything, basically took everything, and I was sort of stuck in Wilmington and Johnston. And there's also some things that really frustrate me. One is the relations with the French and the Spanish. Basically, the French just declared war on me because of an event I had no control over. If you own anything in Rupert's Land, what happens is you get an ultimatum and you have no choice but to refuse it, and then the French come and basically open up another front and destroys all your hard work up north. Bear in mind, that's where most of your economy will be at the start. So that was nice, that was fun, just to put all that work in, just to see my entire northern front collapse and having to re-establish it at the cost of the south. Then at the same time, the Spanish, if you don't get the relations low enough, they'll make a demand for Louisiana. I just gave it to them. I was like, I probably could fight for this, but I'm not going to do it because I'd rather shoot myself in the head than do any more of these battles. So I thought, you know what, Spain, let's have it. Good luck, God bless. But I got lucky at the start of the game. I did form an alliance, and they did declare war with the British for a while. And I did actually see a French naval invasion in the north, which fell dismally at one time. And they did send me some troops, which was nice, which was great. But I deleted most of them because they were too expensive to maintain. So it was good. I liked the idea of it, but it's very artificial at the moment. They'll probably ally you at the start, peace out of you halfway, send you some troops, and then you're going to have be at war with them, or at least war with one around 1779, 1780, whether you like it or not, which becomes an eye-rolling pain in the ass. Army management, again, you do lose the nuance. So for my troops here, I had 3 of these troops throughout the entirety of the war, but because it's such a large scale and there's so much churn of troops and movement, that again, you lose that relationship with your soldiers. It is nice that you can equip them. So I equip them with United States equipment, and occasionally, if I was playing the tactical battles, the Brown Besses. And again, for the economy, I just cheesed it in the end and produced as much ammunition as I could, to sell as much as I could, to build as much as I could, which allowed me to build about 10,000. Altogether about 10,000 troops, but I couldn't maintain them anymore because logistics were starting to get really bad. But there are some elements I do like, for example, provisions did make the game very unique. Provisions really did influence how I played the game, and having to use wagons to supply my troops to go on the offensive. I did like production. I liked how the AI did most of the building for me. But I did not like this rinse and repeat warfare. The game is too sandboxy at the moment, and it needs those America cut into chunks, with which allows the developers to reset the scales and rebalance the game. So at this stage, I had like 11,000 men, and the AI just wouldn't attack the position because it didn't make sense for them to attack 11,000 men, even though they had 21,000 men. So they just died in Hempstead. Whereas if you turn this into the next chapter where you load it in and you can only bring 8,000 troops in, then the game becomes different. Then it becomes a case of survival. Okay, now the game is, how do I put it? The tables have turned. I now actually have to think. Of course, by giving the player bonuses at the start and a constant revenue from the north, depending on how well they did, they don't feel too cheesed out of it. They don't feel like too hard done by. But that's the thing they've done right now. It's just like add to this. It's just like more problems after more problems after more problems. You just stop caring. And I think they could fix it. They just need to add more curated tactical battles, a bit like the Total War, how you have the tactical battle, like the historical, I don't know, the hero battles. Well, again, you could have historical battles, which would give you bonuses and minuses depending on the period, which you could just bring any of your troops into, and you could have the theaters. So I'd have theaters, curated battles, and objectives that had to be achieved within a certain time frame. So take Boston by X, take Ticonderoga by X, take Quebec by X, and if you do all three within a certain time frame, well, yeah, you can just build up and prepare for the next battle, or you can quickly move to the next New York Theatre. It's a game that, if I was to finish my review, that has aimed high and missed the mark. It is a game that has tried to go one further than American Civil War and lost the things that made American Civil War good, while adding things that makes the game tedious. It's a game that wants to build larger in preparation for, say, Napoleonic warfare or Napoleonic wars, but has fallen down. And I hope they take away from this early access, they take away from this that bigger is sometimes not better, and sometimes a better, more curated experience, a more crafted experience provides you a greater enjoyment. So I would give this right now about a 6 out of 10. Bear in mind, American Civil War is about a 10 out of 10 for me. It's still early access. I enjoy playing it while I did. I might play it again to improve it, just to do a YouTube stream or videos of my actual performance, which again, a lot of it is early on save scumming. But for now, it's definitely needs work, and it needs to just cut down this bigger is better mentality. Have theatres, bro. You don't need a whole map. There's nothing to be gained from this. Have theatres. Have little battles that pop up, which you can teleport to, and have objectives to be achieved for each theatre. That's all you need to do. But for me, tell me what you think about the game. Tell me if you like it or not. I'm glad I actually got a victory out of it. It was a hellish experience. And although the game does try and present you this idea that you don't have to hold provinces and you can do a Washington and move around and attack, simple side fact of the matter is your economy and your nation is entirely predicated off holding territory. And so you need to actually play very much like a normal Total War nation. You can't play as like a roving, rampaging Union army. So it just becomes a case of own as many territories as you can. If you lose too many, you end up with a death spiral. And you end up having to borrow or sell. It ends up getting really bad really fast. But tell me what you think. I'll do a video of it now that I've actually won the game once, and I'll probably do a let's play of it. But I probably will do some serious editing, because you would see the same battles over and over and over again. I'm not going to do the 400 battle versus 400 battle. I'm not going to do it's going to be the 2000 versus 2000, or it's going to be key battles on the map or key things that happen. Otherwise, it would be 10 hours of mind-numbing garbage, and you wouldn't be interested in the slightest. But yeah, for now, a game that's aimed to be more ambitious and lost what made it good, and gained more baggage. But they can fix it. I doubt they will because of how late it is into the early access, but they have the capacity to fix the game if they wanted to. And what they need to do is compartmentalize down the theatres. You can have your naval invasions and all that wonderful stuff still. Add more tactical battles and add that and allow for that sort of persistence between theatres and that resetting of the scales. Really break down, compartmentalize the theatres for each year. And then once you're done, maybe towards the end, like 1779, 1780, open up the whole map and have a big old, everyone's attacking you, hold as best you can for like 6 months. And then after that, add more tactical battles, add battles with which are handcrafted, strategic battles with objectives that will overcome what is the boredom of line warfare after X amount of days and X amount of hours of playing. Still, thank you all for watching. I will see you all soon. Here's a look at my stats. There's the army. quite big armies. They're smaller than what you think. They're larger than what you think, but they were pretty badly damaged by lack of economy because my money was starting to run out with the constant British invasions in the south. A couple of professional. My main production was in first civilian muskets and then eventually the United States musket. I pretty much sold pretty much any cannons up towards the mid-late game, sold any ships I produced, sold pretty much most of my supply goods, and then my resources began selling as well, simply because I was running out of money so badly. Funnily enough, you make the most money actually selling ammunition. So towards the end of the game, most of my industry was based around mass production of ammunition. As you can probably tell, because that was basically feeding my economy for most of the game. But tell me what you think. I'll do a let's play. I might do the British campaign. Probably won't because I don't really like the naval warfare aspect of it. But yeah, thanks for playing. Oh yeah, you don't really have to fight. You don't really actually have to do a navy as the United States. I didn't do a navy at all, so that's good. But thank you for watching. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you guys soon. Adieu.